parked under the oak tree, still damp from last night's rain, and carried the jar of blackberry jam in both hands like it was something fragile. Ivy didn't know I was coming. I thought she'd like the surprise. She used to love surprises. But as soon as I stepped inside the farmhouse, something was off. The kitchen was full, too full, coats flung over chairs, a toddler screaming in the next room, and the smell of something greasy frying on the stove. My daughter stood by the sink, her eyes, puffy hair pulled back with a rubber band that looked too tight. She didn't greet me. She just looked at me and tried to smile. It didn't quite land. That's when I heard her. I said, "Get your mother out of my kitchen." The voice came sharp from behind the stove. A woman I recognized from a photo Rosalind Roberts' mother was flipping something in a pan like she owned the place. She didn't even look up. Ivy turned red, then pale. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. "It's fine," I said, my voice calm, the kind of calm I used when I taught 5th grade, and a fight broke out over crayons. I set the jar of jam on the counter. No one said thank you. A man brushed past me with a beer in his hand. I assumed he was one of Robert's brothers. No hello, no eye contact. I stepped back into the hallway, heartbeat steady but loud in my ears. I looked around at the framed photos on the wall, only one of Ivy and Robert. The rest were children I didn't recognize, a family I didn't belong to. Ivy followed me, rubbing her hands on her jeans. "Sorry, Mama, they've been here a while." "How long is a while?" I asked. She didn't answer, just looked toward the kitchen. And that's when I noticed the guest bedroom door was closed and the light beneath it was on. 6 months ago, I stood on this porch with Ivy and handed her the deed papers like they were a second chance. She had barely spoken to Robert in weeks back then. Long silences, quiet dinners, a tension you could feel through the phone. I told her maybe a change of place would help, a bit of earth to call her own. "I don't know, Mama," she said. "What if it just follows us here?" "It won't," I had promised. "This is yours. You choose what it becomes." I meant it. The loan was in my name, but the house, every room, every window, every inch of that front yard was hers. No strings, no shared ownership, just Ivy. I wanted her to feel rooted, strong. I wanted her to remember who she was before the silences. But last night, I woke to the sound of Rosalind's slippers moving down the hall. Ivy was curled on the couch, covered with a blanket that didn't reach her feet. The master bedroom door was closed again. Light off this time. I didn't ask questions. This morning she brewed coffee without meeting my eyes. Rosalind took the first cup without a word. Robert never came out of the room. "I can make breakfast," I offered. "I already made grits," Ivy said quickly, like she'd be punished for letting me touch the stove. I sat at the kitchen table and watched them eat. Rosalind talked about someone's baby's shower. Ivy nodded, half listening, her eyes distant. She reached for the sugar bowl and spilled some across the table. No one moved to help her clean it. After they cleared their plates, Ivy walked with me out to the shed. She used to store her canvases there, her brushes, jars of dried flowers, scraps of color taped to the walls. Today, the walls were bare. Her art table was covered in someone's laundry. "I haven't painted in a while," she murmured. I didn't answer. I just looked at the single nail still hanging in the wall, waiting to hold something again. It started with a funeral. Ivy told me that much as we walked the edge of the garden. Robert's cousin had passed suddenly, and his family needed space to grieve. Just for a week, they'd said that was over 2 months ago. First came the folding CS in the guest room, then the coolers stacked by the back door. Rosalind took the master bedroom the second night to help Robert rest. His sisters brought suitcases. One of them started doing the laundry, only their own Ivy's clothes piled untouched in a basket by the hall. Robert said it wouldn't be long, Ivy said as she pulled weeds with gloved hands. But no one really talked about leaving. I didn't say what I was thinking, that Robert didn't have to talk about it, because silence works just fine for those who benefit from it. That evening, I went to the shed again. The laundry was gone, but so was the little ceramic jar Ivy used to keep her brushes in. Her easel was folded and pushed behind a stack of crates, plastic tubs of soda, and off-brand beer. One of the tubs had her initials on it, barely visible under a smear of dust. She hadn't touched any of it. It was like her space had been packed up and repurposed without a word. Back inside, I watched her set 4 places at the table. Rosalind barked something from the hallway about paper napkins this time. Ivy nodded, adjusted the forks, and didn't sit down until everyone else was halfway through their meal. After dinner, she stood at the sink while Robert scrolled through his phone in the living room. No one offered to help. Her back was hunched as she scrubbed. Her wedding ring slipped loosely on her finger. I leaned against the doorway and took it all in. No shouting, no bruises, no slammed doors, just a slow erosion of space breath voice. And when Ivy dropped a plate and it shattered across the floor, she didn't flinch. She just knelt down quietly, picking up the pieces with her bare hands. I offered to help her weed the front beds that morning. The air was dry, the soil hard. Ivy knelt down with a grunt, trying to hide the way her hands shook. I noticed the blisters, fresh raw, and split open at the creases. "You need gloves," I said gently. "I had a pair," she murmured, avoiding my eyes. "Rosalind said they were moldy. Tossed them last week. We didn't talk after that, just worked side by side in the dirt." Her silence wasn't cold. It was practice, like someone who'd grown used to shrinking their words into quiet corners. Later, while Ivy went to shower, I stepped into the kitchen for a glass of water. That's when I saw it. Rosalind at the trash can, holding a mug with pale blue flowers and a faint hairline crack along the handle. "That old thing." She scoffed ugly and chipped. I said nothing. She dropped it in without blinking. When she turned away, I reached in and retrieved it, careful not to let it clink against the other garbage. I wrapped it in a dish towel and placed it in my bag. That mug wasn't just ceramic. I had given it to Ivy when she first left for college. She'd carried it through every apartment, every phase of her life. It wasn't cracked until recently. That night, I came out from the guest room to get a glass of water and saw her on the couch. She was curled toward the cushions, arms slung over her eyes, still wearing the same jeans from earlier. The television flickered but made no sound. A half-finished glass of tea sat on the table. Her phone was face down, untouched. She didn't speak. She didn't move. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I should cover her with the blanket or just let her be. In the end, I did neither. I went back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the folded deed in my suitcase. Tomorrow, I would drive into town. The next morning, I left early without waking Ivy. The roads were quiet, the kind that give you time to think, but no comfort while doing it. I parked outside the county office just before it opened and walked in with my shoulders square. "Property deed for 218 Larchill Road," I said to the clerk. "Owner name Ivy Monroe." She tapped at the keyboard, printed 2 copies, and slid them across the counter without question. I folded one and kept the other flat. My hands didn't shake until I got back in the car. By the time I returned, the house was alive with noise. Rosalind yelling at someone for dripping water on the tile. One of the sisters laughing too loud in the hallway. I walked through it all, not stopping until I reached the kitchen table. I laid the paper down, gently smoothing the edges so no one could pretend it wasn't real. "Ivy owns this house," I said. Rosalind turned. "Excuse me. This property," I continued, tapping the heading, "was purchased in full with my help, but legally it belongs to Ivy. No one else is on the deed. That includes you, Robert." Robert looked up from his phone, brows pulling tight. "What is this, a boundary?" I said, "You have until noon tomorrow to pack." Rosalind opened her mouth, ready to fight, but I raised my hand, not in anger, just finality. No need to argue. This isn't a discussion. Silence rippled across the room. Ivy stood at the threshold, still in her morning clothes, eyes wide. I turned to her. "You don't have to say anything." She didn't, but she crossed the room slowly and stood beside me. That night, no one said a word at dinner. Paper plates, no laughter, just forks clinking and one clock ticking too loud. And in the morning, I woke before dawn and listened from the guest room as doors opened, bags shuffled, voices muttered behind walls. By 11:45, the house was quiet again. The house didn't go quiet right away. That night, it groaned and hissed like an old wound reopening. Doors slammed, cabinets opened harder than necessary. Someone dropped a pot just to let it echo. From the guest room, I heard Rosalind's voice rise. "You let her humiliate us!" she spat. Your own mother, Ivy's voice was barely audible. She just showed you the truth. Then came Robert's low reply. Something bitter, something final. I couldn't catch the words, but I heard the silence that followed. I didn't get up. I didn't step in. That part of me, the one that used to smooth over family dinners and write polite notes, had gone quiet. I lay still, listening to the weight of consequences settle into the walls. In the morning, no one came out for breakfast. The coffee was half-ate and left abandoned. Ivy sat at the edge of the porch with her knees pulled up to her chest. I sat beside her, neither of us speaking. At 11:52, I heard the first car engine sputter to life. I stayed inside and let them pass like a storm. One sister came out dragging a suitcase, muttering about disrespect. Another followed sunglasses on, refusing to say goodbye. Rosalind was the last. She came down the stairs loud on purpose, heels clicking on the hardwood. She didn't look at Ivy. She barely glanced at me. You think this makes you right? She snapped, stuffing a tote bag with whatever hadn't already been packed. You've ruined your own family. No, I said quietly. You just finally met the part of it that was willing to speak. She scoffed, slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows, and stomped down the gravel driveway. I watched from behind the curtain as her car disappeared down the road. The engine noise faded, but the echo of her footsteps still seemed to linger. Ivy didn't move from the porch. I walked outside with a glass of water and placed it beside her without a word. Her eyes were glassy but dry, and for the first time in weeks, the wind blew without carrying voices behind it. Robert didn't pack, not right away. While the rest of his family left in a flurry of bags and insults, he lingered by the back door, arms crossed, jaw tight. He stood there as if his silence could reverse everything, as if being still enough might bring them all back. Ivy came in from the porch, her steps slow, her shoulders low. She didn't look at him. She just walked to the sink and turned on the water, rinsing out a mug that wasn't hers. He watched her, then finally spoke. You let her humiliate my family. Ivy didn't flinch. She dried the mug and set it down. Your family humiliated me first. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. Just even honest. She said it like someone who'd rehearsed the line in her head for years and finally had space to say it out loud. Robert shook his head, looking at me like I was the root of all this. She stirred things up. I didn't respond. I didn't owe him words. My presence wasn't what broke the house. It only held up a mirror. He waited for me to defend myself, for Ivy to take it back, but no one did. That night, his truck stayed parked outside. He didn't eat. He didn't speak again. Just paced between rooms like a man trying to find a place that no longer existed. In the morning, I woke to the sound of drawers opening, a bag being zipped, the heavy thump of boots near the door. Ivy stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, watching him load the last of his things. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't even close the tailgate properly. He just climbed in, reversed down the driveway, and disappeared without ever looking back. The house didn't sigh with relief. It didn't collapse or cheer. It just held the silence. Ivy walked away from the window and into the hallway without a word, and I followed her, ready to help her find her space again. We started with the sheets. The smell of old perfume and unfamiliar laundry soap clung to the fabric as we pulled it off the mattress in the master bedroom. Ivy didn't say a word. She just gathered it all. Sheets, pillowcases, even the throw blanket, and shoved it into the washer without flinching. The closets were next. One of Robert's sisters had left a half-used bottle of hairspray and a stack of outdated magazines. Rosalind's robe still hung on the back of the door like it was waiting to be claimed. Ivy tugged it down, folded it once, and dropped it in the donation box without ceremony. The windows opened for the first time in weeks. Fresh air swept through like a quiet apology, stirring the curtains and lifting the weight in the walls. In the corner of the closet, behind a pair of scuffed slippers, Ivy found a sketch pad. Charcoal smudges lined the edges, and the corner of one page curled outward. She didn't say anything as she flipped through it, but her hand hovered on one unfinished drawing, an outline of the garden path half-shadowed. She didn't put it away. That afternoon, we repainted the pantry. Ivy picked a deep rusty shade, something between clay and cinnamon. "No one else would choose it," she said with a grin. "That's why I want it." I nodded and handed her the roller. We didn't talk much while we worked, but the quiet between us was different now. Not full of avoidance, but presence. She hummed once under her breath like she used to when she sketched by the porch. When we finished, she wiped the last drip of paint from her wrist and leaned against the wall cheeks, flushed from the work. I went to the sink, washed the old cracked mug carefully and set it on the windowsill above the kitchen sink. Ivy glanced at it once, then looked back at the pantry with a satisfied breath. She didn't stop me. That night, she made tea and used that same mug. The envelope was thin and cream-colored with Ivy's name written in a sharp, careful hand. No return address, but we both knew who it was from. She opened it at the kitchen table, read it once, then again more slowly. Her lips didn't move, but I could see her jaw set tighter with each line. "You made a mistake," it said. "Family doesn't treat each other this way. You embarrassed us. You let her divide us." Ivy folded it in half, then crumpled it, pressing the paper into her palm until her knuckles turned white. She didn't shred it. She didn't cry. She just stood and walked to the trash, dropping it in like it weighed nothing. An hour later, her phone buzzed. She didn't check it right away. She let it sit on the counter as she finished sweeping. When she finally glanced at the screen, her face didn't change. A single message from Robert. "Miss you. Hope the house still feels like home." She stared at it for a moment, then tapped once. Delete. No reply, no hesitation. By late afternoon, she was outside with gloves on a small bag of bulbs in her hand. I joined her, handing over the tell when she nodded. "Too late for tulips?" I asked gently. "They'll hold," she said. "If I plant them now, they'll bloom when the weather's better." She paused, pushing another bulb into the soil. "Maybe so will I." We worked in companionable silence, lining the driveway with promise. Every few feet, she'd mark the spot with a flat stone, small and smooth. By the time we reached the porch, her hands were streaked with dirt and her eyes a little brighter. She didn't look back toward the road, not once. That night, she pulled out her sketch pad again, set it on the kitchen table, and began to draw something without showing me. I didn't ask. I just made us tea and left the door to the porch open, letting the breeze carry the scent of turned earth into the house. 3 months passed, like seasons slipping into one another. Slow but certain, the barn smells like linseed oil. Now Ivy teaches art classes on Saturdays. A few women from town come by sketchbooks in hand, their laughter rolling through the fields. Ivy laughs with them, loud and unguarded, in a way I hadn't heard in years. I still stay in the guest room, though it looks different now. Ivy painted the walls a soft wheat color, and there's a small vase of dried flowers beside the bed. She calls it my wing of the house, like we're running a bed and breakfast. I cook breakfast most mornings. Nothing fancy, just eggs and toast. Ivy hums while she brews coffee, sometimes swaying to old music playing low from the kitchen radio. She doesn't talk much about Robert or Rosalind. There's no need. Some absences explain themselves. One morning, after the dishes were washed and the sunlight poured golden across the floor, Ivy reached for the windowsill. She picked up the old cracked mug, our quiet relic of everything, and turned it over in her hands. "It's not perfect," she said more to herself than to me, "but it still holds things." She didn't smile when she said it. She didn't have to. It was truth, not decoration. Then she placed it carefully on the open kitchen shelf between a clay jar and her favorite chipped bowl. It looked like it belonged there. I nodded only once. We sat down for breakfast plates warm between us, steam rising from our cups. Ivy played a soft-track piano, something wordless, and for a moment the house didn't feel like something we were recovering from. It felt lived in, rooted.